Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on a Thursday night. And we begin with that deeply personal moment at the White House today. Chief of Staff General John Kelly coming into the briefing room, defending President Trump's phone call to the family of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson. And in doing so, General Kelly talking about the loss of his own son right there in Afghanistan. General Kelly revealing the president asked him, "What do I say when I call?" And then the general blasted the congresswoman who said the family was offended by the president's call. That family has said the same thing. General Kelly did not address today, though, whether he was bothered by the president first bringing up those solemn calls early this week, comparing himself to his predecessors. ABC senior White House correspondent Cecilia Vega leading us off.
This was John Kelly, not just as chief of staff, but as a retired four-star general and a father whose own son Robert was killed in 2010 when he stepped on a landmine in Afghanistan. Kelly says he personally counseled President Trump on how to call the grieving families of fallen soldiers.
There's no perfect way to make that phone call. When I took this job and talked to President Trump about how to do it, my first recommendation was he not do it. Because it's not the phone call that parents, family members are looking forward to. It's nice to do, in my opinion, in any event. He asked me about previous presidents, and I said I can tell you that President Obama, who was my commander-in-chief when I was on active duty, did not call my family. That was not a criticism. That was just to simply say, I don't believe President Obama called. That's not a negative thing.
Kelly says he and President Trump spoke before those calls to the families of the 4 special ops soldiers killed in Niger.
And he said to me, what do I say? I said to him, sir, there's nothing you can do to lighten the burden on these families. But let me tell you what I tell them. And let me tell you what my best friend, Joe Dunford, told me, because he was my casualty officer. He said, Kel, he was doing exactly what he wanted to do when he was killed. He knew what he was getting into by joining that 1%. He knew what the possibilities were because we're at war. And when he died, in the 4 cases we're talking about, Niger, my son's case in Afghanistan, when he died, he was surrounded by the best men on this earth, his friends. That's what the president tried to say to 4 families the other day.
The president did tell the widow of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson that her husband knew what he was signing up for. But the president's message and how it was delivered did not sit well with Sergeant Johnson's mother, who told the Washington Post, President Trump did disrespect my son and my daughter, and also me and my husband. And Democratic Florida Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, who also listened to that call on speakerphone, went public with her frustration.
He kept referring to him as your guy. He never called his name. So that was even more painful.
Today, Kelly defended his boss.
In his way, tried to express that opinion. He's a brave man, a fallen hero. He knew what he was getting himself into because he enlisted. There's no reason to enlist. He enlisted. And he was where he wanted to be, exactly where he wanted to be, with exactly the people he wanted to be with when his life was taken. That was the message. That was the message that was transmitted.
And he lashed out at the congresswoman.
It stuns me that a member of Congress would have listened in on that conversation. Absolutely stuns me. And I thought at least that was sacred.
But Kelly did not address President Trump's role in this controversy, that he was the one who ignited the firestorm when he turned a question about those 4 fallen soldiers in Niger into a political swipe at his predecessors.
The traditional way, if you look at President Obama and other presidents, most of them didn't make calls. A lot of them didn't make calls. I like to call when it's appropriate, when I think I'm able to do it.
And Cecilia Vega with us live from the White House tonight. And Cecilia, Chief of Staff John Kelly made it very clear how upset he was with that congresswoman. Do we know if he was at all upset with the president earlier this week, who first brought up those very solemn calls that are often kept private, comparing himself to his predecessors?
Well, David, I'm told that John Kelly is indeed very angry, but his anger tonight is not directed at President Trump. It is indeed directed at Congresswoman Wilson and at the media for what this administration very much views as unfair attacks on this president. I'm told this was John Kelly's idea to come out and talk to these cameras today. He very much publicly wanted to address this, David.
He made that clear today. Cecilia Vega.